Okay, so looking at the metal element, the organs of the metal element are the lungs and the large intestine. Lung time is 3 to 5 a.m. Large intestine time is 5 to 7 a.m. And often in the monasteries, one gets up early and does their morning practice. And if you have problems with the constipation or problems with your bowels, if you train yourself to give yourself time between 5 to 7 a.m., certainly you'll probably be on the more on the 7 a.m. part of it, but you will be able to train your bowel to move and to do its job. We call the lungs the official of receiving the pure chi from the heavens. So it brings in oxygen, obviously, to the lungs. The lungs distribute it to the red blood cells, and the red blood cells take it to nourish the rest of the body, bringing oxygen to all the cells, including the brain. So again, we can go for a while without eating and drinking. We can't go long without breathing. So the importance of the function of the lungs to extract the chi from the air that we breathe is critical to our life. And so both having good quality air and having the lungs do their job are both important. And the large intestine is the official of, it's like the garbage man of the body, getting rid of solid toxic waste. The sense organ is the nose. It has to do with our smelling. And it is interesting that those people who got COVID, which affects the lungs, also one of those symptoms is loss of sense of smell. The tissue associated with the metal element is skin. That is the largest organ of the body, the skin. And it has a respiration too. It breathes and detoxes through the skin. So eczema and a variety of rashes and irritations, psoriasis, those kinds of things, the body, it gets rid of toxins through the skin and breathes, again, has a respiration. So we say the skin is the tissue associated with the metal element. The emotion is grief or sadness, or this, it can often be feelings of insecurity and lack of self-worth and value. So metal, the jin, is the Chinese word, J-I-N, it's often spelled J-I-N, and it refers to gold, which is usually kind of the highest quality metal that we think of in terms of trading and things like that, gold. So that is the essence of our body, mind, spirit. And sometimes when the body is, or our mind is in a state of dis-ease, we have a low sense of self-esteem, a low sense of self-worth and value. But the truth of the matter is, is we have Buddha nature, and we are Buddhas, and we can't say anything greater about that. But those who deceive themselves and thinking that they are this small ego, and often I think that is really going to be a thing in the future, the sense of self-worth and value and purpose and meaning in their life. So that is important to establishing a good, strong metal balance. The odor is rotten, often like the smell of meat. It doesn't have to be rotten meat, but if you go in a butcher shop, there's a particular smell. The smell of blood often has a particular smell to it, a quality to it that is associated with this odor. So a person who has an imbalance here has this particular kind of odor. We talked about the rancid with the wood and the scorched with the fire and a kind of a sweet, cloying, fragrant with the earth. This is, I know these words are not so attractive, but it is a particular quality of the odor of this person, which is rotten. The sound is weeping or crying. They have that quality of you feel like they're ready to cry, but really they're not. But the sound of the voice has this weeping quality to it. In when I teach to students, there's often many different imbalances, and the sound of weeping it can be associated with particular people, and to hear the sound, you immediately say, "Oh yes, that sounds like weeping." The healing sound is as if you were saying shh or to a child. So we had done an exercise of breathing in to the organ. When you breathe in the sound or the healing quality as a brilliant white color, and exhaling out the sound, that is a healing sound that goes with the metal element. And if we have time, we will do a little bit of that as well. The climate is dry. So often, people are told to go out west if they have allergies or breathing problems. The dryness often is helpful, but some people also find that it dries them out. So in particular, when I was out in Colorado, it's very dry, and I got a bloody nose from it. I got so dried out. So it is always a question of balance. The color is white, and a preference towards white, or really an aversion to white. The taste is pungent, so having this kind of spicy taste attraction. And if you go for Japanese food and you have wasabi, it'll make your nose run. It'll open up your sinuses as well. But that pungent taste is nourishing to a degree to the lungs. And we said the nose is the gateway to the lungs. We should be breathing through the nose. It filters the air and brings it to the proper temperature. So breathing through the mouth is not considered healthy. So breathing through the nose whenever you can. In fact, now they have little tape things, and you can be like a Band-Aid, you tape your lips together so you don't, if you're a mouth breather, so you don't breathe through your mouth. The direction is west, and we are in the fall season right now, the autumn. This is a time we've come from the springtime of the wood element, new shoots coming up through the maturation on earth with the fullness of the crops and harvest time. This is now late harvest, where we're kind of finishing up withdrawing and beginning to contract, going into a yin time of the year. Fire is the extreme yang part, the summer, and then late summer it begins to become more yin, and now the fall is withdrawal. The leaves are beginning to fall off the trees, and we are going into a more yin time. The sun, we have less sunshine and more darkness. So autumn is associated with this time of withdrawal. It's a time when we gather nature's bounty. As I say, it's the end of the growing season, and we reap what we have sown in the spring. But not only physically, but not only from a farmer's point of view, but mentally and emotionally, and from a creative point of view as well, coming to fruition. And being grateful certainly for the harvest and the fruits and the vegetables and the nuts and the seeds. But also, it's a critical time for reflection in our lives. It's an excellent time to contemplate the qualities we wish to nourish and to cultivate those positive behaviors that serve our higher purpose. And we can clear away the negative habits that do not serve our higher goals and aspirations. So it's a time that naturally lends itself to taking stock in where we are and establishing a clear strategy for moving forward. So fall officially begins with the fall equinox on the September the 22nd. But the hint of this can come before. Now we had a very warm the season thus far, breaking records for heat, but autumn generally, as we were saying, represents the beginning of the yin time of year, when we begin to slow down and prepare for winter. And the brilliant colors of the fall foliage and clear blue skies and cool, dry air are a welcome relief from the heat and humidity of the previous summer. So I mentioned that Jin represents the symbol for metal in Chinese medicine, which is gold. And this represents our precious, valuable, hidden internal qualities, our Buddha nature. And we might say, that, in our Buddhist tradition, we call it Buddha nature. And it's really the basic understanding of our innate goodness and our potential to realize it. It presents us with tremendous opportunity to achieve true happiness. And its cultivation leads to our sense of self-worth and value in the highest and best manifestation. We were saying the metal element has to do with our sense of self-worth. There is nothing greater than this aspect of cultivating Buddha nature as we continue to progress along our spiritual path. Any question about anything so far? So we've mentioned grief and sorrow as the emotion associated with this element. And, now that we're in this COVID period, which has very much affected the lungs, and overall, we have very much been able to kind of manipulate our environment to a degree. We can keep it warm when it's cold or cooler when it's hot. But we're not so good with the internal aspects, and there are different causes and conditions for illness. Some are the inner causes, the emotions, and some are the outer causes, the temperature and seasons, the seasonal things. But unresolved grief is the underlying aspect of this element, and not letting go of past resentments and holding on to past grudges and personal losses, having a sense of that low self-esteem because of maybe actions that we took that weren't so skillful, and the lack of sense of self-worth and whatever we feel that we should be doing and are not, and very critical of ourselves. The metal element can be very rigid and very critical, not only of oneself, but others as well. And acceptance can be difficult for all of us, but it is an important antidote for suffering. We want things to be different, but suppressing grief is really unhealthy for our metal element. As the metal element is connected with the lungs, it predisposes us to these symptoms of asthma, bronchitis, pneumonia. And this time of year, we're coming into a time when we have the seasonal flus and things like that. So the capacity to balance our emotions is an important part of our well-being and our immune system. The inner factors of disease, such as emotions of fear, which are due with water, anger, which is associated with the wood element, and overexcitement and worry, all those things are the inner folk factors, and the external factors, as I mentioned, heat, cold, dry, damp, wind. The inner factors now probably are more important than the outer factors. We have been able to resolve some of those with technology, but we haven't done so well with our inner capacity. to train ourselves in that way. And having the right view and doing the practices that we're doing creates the opportunity to really improve our inner life. As we know, everything is in a continual process of change and flux. And if the harder we cling to something, the more resistance we have to it, the more suffering there is, directly related to the degree of our clinging and our attachment and our aversions. We mentioned when we talked about the earth element that it's associated with the mother and mothering and Mother Earth. The metal element is generally connected to the father. We often get our sense of self-worth from our father. Mother is unconditional love for the most part. Hopefully that is your experience. But the father is more of an authoritarian figure in many households. And of course, trying to get recognition from the outside never works, but it starts at home, and it can lead to these ideas that if we climb the corporate ladder and attain a PhD or strive for a position of authority, we'll be happy. But that's never satisfying in itself. There's always more. You know, in this situation, one is never enough. It's never enough. We're always seeking respect and recognition from the outside as an important focal point. That is certainly true for the person who has this particular imbalance, this metal element. And respect, you know, we all want respect. It seems like in our culture, most recently, there has been a lack of respect for one another. You know, in the yogic traditions, and in Tibet, you know, in India, we say namaste. You know, we bow to the divine within you. That is the ultimate kind of respect, and we understand we each have that same quality. Or in Tibet, we say tashidelik. You know, may all be auspicious for you, because we know all beings want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. May you have good fortune. And we acknowledge that within each of us. You know, it's healing for both the giver and the receiver to have that quality, that attitude toward one another. So during this time, it is good to take a little extra vitamin D, because we may not be in the sun. Your body synthesizes vitamin D naturally through the skin and by exposure to the sun. So it's not unusual, as the days get shorter and the nights get longer, we have less opportunity to be in the sun, and consequently, it's not unusual to have deficiencies in vitamin D. So you can take a little extra vitamin D as we approach the winter and into the winter. That is very important for your immune system and your capacity to fight off pathogens that result in colds and flus. So if you could get in the morning sun for about 20 minutes or so, exposing as much skin as possible, that is very helpful. So I think most of you know about the functions of the lungs and the situation with the lungs. The lungs extend from the diaphragm, which is that large dome muscle underneath the rib cage, to above the collarbone. Actually, there is the lobes of the lung actually extend above the collarbone. We often don't breathe into those areas, so there's exercises you can do to inhale, bringing the head to the left, for example, and breathing into that upper right-hand quadrant, really opening that up so it doesn't atrophy. It is a use it or lose it situation. As we say, the important function of the lungs to extract the energy, the chi from the air that we breathe. So the lungs are divided into different sections called lobes, and the whole system branches out into about 300 million alveoli. They are the small sacs that extract the air and send it in the bloodstream into the red blood cells that distribute it. So the lungs also help regulate the carbon dioxide in our body. We breathe in the oxygen, get rid of the carbon dioxide, and that also regulates the blood pressure based on the acid alkaline of the blood. If we get too much carbon dioxide, the blood pressure will go up, heart rate will go up, so that we breathe more, faster, getting the carbon dioxide out of our system. There's a feedback system, and it works very well to keep balance in the body. So we're always taking in and letting go. We're taking in, just like we take in air that we breathe, we're taking in new concepts, new ideas, absorbing what we can, releasing what we no longer need, such as grief, old ideas, concepts that don't work anymore. So that's like getting rid of them through our mental large intestine or mental colon. And this wei qi or protective qi we have on our skin also is enhanced through our breathing. And we are weakened when we don't breathe properly. So doing pranayama, yogic exercises should always include pranayama or breathing exercises to keep our wei qi healthy. That is important to keep us, particularly with the cold and flu season. And I may have mentioned this to you, but good not to sleep under a fan, because that creates a wind-cold condition. And you may be covered, but your face is not. And that wind cold constantly, if you can feel it on you, goes through the pores of the skin and creates an imbalance. And again, you may be covered, but your head is not. So you can have problems with the eyes, sinus congestion, other kinds of problems. So you don't want to have the wind blowing on you, whether it's an air vent or an overhead fan. This wind invasion, some of you may be sensitive to the wind. And if you go out in the days that we went out to restaurants, you wouldn't want to sit under a fan because it bothered you. You didn't want to feel that wind on you. It is true that, or your mother may have told you, don't go outside with a wet head of hair, because it'll be on your neck, and the neck is actually a very important place to keep covered. So people would wear scarves and shawls and things like that. There's a point on the back of the head called the wind palace that is a place where is vulnerable to the wind. So I think we also know about functions of the large intestine in Western medicine. It does absorb water, salts, cellulose, food. Cellulose is an non-digested fiber, and it is important for your probiotics. Your probiotics are in the large intestine primarily. There's a thing that is often goes undiagnosed that I mentioned when we were talking about the fire element and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. And that is a problem when the bacteria gets out of control in the small intestine. Generally, when we take our probiotics, they are to nourish the friendly flora the biome of our gut, but primarily the large intestine. It houses the digestive bacteria and aid in the absorption and further breakdown of undigested foods. So this cellulose, for example, kiwi or avocado, asparagus, various things that are kind of have that roughage or a cellulose helps to, it's called a prebiotic because it is nourishing to those probiotics, the acidophilus and a whole host of many different varieties of bacteria. So that keeps your digestive system healthy. And if you don't know, there's there's an ascending colon, transverse colon, and descending colon, and it is about 5 feet in length and about 2.5 inches. It can expand to more, but B12 is also manufactured in your large intestine for those who can do it. But sometimes there are genetic predispositions where you can't make the B12. So taking a sublingual B12 would be important. And if you're taking a B12, taking a liquid B12 or a chewable that you let dissolve under the tongue is best. It's very important vitamin for energy and vitality and blood. And for vegetarians, often who don't eat meat or have animal products, they're not getting B12, and it needs to be taken as a supplement. It's often missing or low in vegans. So as we mentioned, the colon is the garbage man of the body, ridding us of toxic waste. And the peak time is 5 to 7 a.m. That's when the body's garbage man comes. And if you have issues with diarrhea or constipation or issues, then we want to make sure that the biome is good, that we're feeding properly, using probiotics, prebiotics, and fermented foods. Any other questions? I've been rattling on now for some time. Any questions?
Lama, for a preteen or teen who's decided to be vegetarian, also you would recommend the B12?
Absolutely. Yep. And probiotics. And, unfortunately for vegetarians and vegans, they eat so much soy. So having a variety of foods, a full complement, so on your plate you have different colors, different tastes. You can be vegetarian. We have lots of choices, but you do have to know how to do it. So the book that I recommended, Ketotarian, is gives some insights into those too, and the oils and the other kinds of vegetables, and for the essential fatty acids as well, that you won't be getting if you're really eliminating the animal products. But they can be found in other oils, in the nuts or seeds oils. So you just have to know how to do it. I know a lot of vegetarians who don't like vegetables, and they just eat tons of bread and pastas, and they wonder why they're pre-diabetic, because those are all carbs, and their body just can't handle it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Should you eat prebiotics before you eat probiotics?
Just along with or along the way. They don't have to be right together, but they've got to be somewhere in the dietary, the daily activity would be ideal.
Okay.
Your probiotics are going to be there. They're not going to come and go unless you've got diarrhea, unless you've taken antibiotics or steroids or things like that that really disrupt the friendly flora of your gut. So, of course, if you have to take an antibiotic for any reason, you must take probiotics or fermented foods to replace that, to restore that.
Lama, just a quick question. Nutritional yeast, is that sufficient replacement of B12 or not really?
It is a replacement, but I don't think a complete replacement. I mean, that it is rich in B12, but you have to take a pretty fair amount. If you're just using it as a condiment, you're not going to be getting enough.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
What about digestive enzymes? They sell, in these shops, bottles of digestive enzymes, they're pills.
Yeah,
Do you know anything about those?
Yeah, digestive enzymes can be very helpful. And if you don't have a gallbladder, for example, you're going to need digestive enzymes because you don't have the bile to digest things, particularly the heavier proteins or those kinds of things, or fats. So digestive enzymes are important. And for a person without a gallbladder, you'd have to take some ox bile. Actually, it would be like a medicine. And I know some vegetarians would balk at that, but it would be considered a medicine. It is actually ox bile. And but that bile is very important and missing because you don't have the storage space in your gallbladder. The gallbladder stores bile, as we've talked about before. And and digestive enzymes, if they're taken with food, they will help the digestion. And there's the various ones for the digestion of fats and sugars and proteins and the rest. And so a complete complement of that is good. Yeah. A lot of people need, particularly as you get older, we lose our digestive function, our enzymes, and people's diets do that contribute to that and are bad, not only bad diets, but taking particular medicines, prescription, and other over-the-counter really interfere with the gut's capacity. So the other thing is with that is not to drink a lot of cold water. The stomach, that we mentioned, is like a big enzyme factory. I mean, it's like it has to be warm. It cooks the food and helps it digest. But it is important that you not chill it with cold water. And if you take the digestive enzymes with food, it will help digest. And if you take it between meals, it has an anti-inflammatory effect, actually a pain-relieving effect. So that is also used for pain enzymes.
Lama,
Yes.
you had mentioned that cold water is not too good for you. I'm outside working in the hot sun a lot.
Yeah.
And cold water is a lot more refreshing.
Oh, that's fine. I'm just saying with a meal.
With a meal. Okay, I
Yeah.
understand.
We don't want to chill the stomach when you're trying to digest. It interferes again, and you're also diluting your hydrochloric acid, which you need. A lot of times the people are given antacids, for stomach problems, and the problem really isn't too much acid; it's not enough. And so when you give the antacid, it may or may not be effective. So knowing the climate of the gut is important. Taking antacids, it often is not the answer to the problem. It's actually to improve the digestive system, taking the necessary to enhance the body's probiotics and the biome is much more important than taking a drug that actually interferes with the natural biome of the gut. The other thing that's good is the healing behavior. When we think about it, is we mentioned pranayama, but also infrared saunas is one of the best ways to remove toxins, particularly heavy metals. It helps to cleanse and purify the body. Just sweat it out. It is one of the best ways to remove heavy metals from the body. There's not many good ways to do that. And we store heavy metals. It's cumulative. So from the food that we eat and the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. So taking a sauna is also helpful. Dry brushing the skin, is also good for the skin. But breaking a sweat, does expel the toxins. So the metal personality tends to be kind of rigid, as I mentioned, and somewhat dogmatic. They don't bend much. Metal doesn't bend. It is pretty stiff. And so a person can be pretty dogmatic and very ethical in a certain, very moral and upright. But sometimes, if you can say to a fault, they're very hard on themselves and very hard on others if they don't meet their moral expectations or ethical expectations. So the virtue or the paramita, the perfection associated with this element is ethics, morality, conduct. This is the enlightened quality of virtuous and ethical behavior, morality, self-discipline, personal integrity, honor. So the essence of this virtue is that through our love and compassion, we do not harm others with our thoughts, speech, and actions. And love helps to soften. We can think of it as warm. When we think of compassion, loving kindness, we think of it as warmth. And the warmth can make the metal malleable. We can work with the metal a little easier. Often there's not a lot of warmth with the metal element. They can be cold and cutting. They can be sarcastic. And so the essence of this virtue is that through our love and compassion, we can be softer, warmer with our thoughts, our speech, and our actions, not only to others, but to ourselves. If we hear that internal chatter, we can be very critical to ourselves, even more than we might be with others. So we realize that unethical behavior is always a cause of suffering and unhappiness. So we want to cultivate the moral, ethical uprightness, and practicing the perfection of ethics. We are free of negativity. We are at ease, naturally confident, happy, because we're not carrying any underlying sense of guilt or remorse. We have nothing to hide. So this is the virtue. So I was mentioning some foods, other foods. Any question about that? So we said the color is white. So it is true with our foods as well, to a certain degree. The good foods to boost our metal element would be white veggies. We could consider mushrooms in this way, and cauliflower, root vegetables such as parsnips, turnips, artichokes, and spicy and pungent foods, onion, garlic, chives, lotus, tofu, tempeh. These are all in this realm. Radish, especially daikon. Daikon is really good for the lungs, opens the lungs. Daikon is a large radish, you may know.
What about potato?
It is not so spicy. We're looking for the savory or the spicy, pungent food. That is more of an earth food.
Thank you.
So cooking with, spices are fine. Cloves, pungent chili peppers, ginger, basil, rosemary are all great additions. And if you're used to cooking and you have a little a garden to grow, these herbs are great. rice is the grain associated with the metal element. And some of you may know of kanji. Kanji is like a rice gruel that is very easily digested, very digestible. And when people are recovering or are sick, in traditional Chinese medicine, we suggest different kanjis, and they can be made spicy with ginger. They can be made with a variety of things, and you could Google kanji and get all kinds of recipes that you can put in a slow cooker, pressure cooker, and just have that kanji. Very easily digested, very nourishing. Kongi, kanji.
Lama, what would you say about millet and also turmeric?
Turmeric is excellent. I really subscribe to turmeric. It does have a spicy quality to it, and you can use it certainly in that. And what was the other one? Turmeric and
Millet.
millet. Yeah, millet is a grain. Yeah, that is fine too. Yes, that is more of an earth grain. Millet is more associated with the earth element. Rice is associated with the metal element.
Oh, wow. Huh. Thank you.
But earth and metal, earth is the mother of metal. So for example, someone who has a metal imbalance, we would always treat the mother. So in that sense, we'd be treating the earth element as well. So when you look at those two, the grain and the turmeric, both of those would be fine for the fall season. That would be nourishing and protective. So essential oils, sometimes people ask me about essential oils, aromatherapy. Chamomile and geranium are good for the metal element. Peppermint is good for the lungs, inhaling it, but having it in a mister, one of those things. Sandalwood is good for the skin. It's also good for phlegm, to steam inhalation. And the herbs for constipation, to aid in constipation, fennel, cumin, clove, ginger. It also helps with digestion. So, at an Indian restaurant, sometimes there's those bowl of herbs that you can get. I don't think we're going to see those for a while because people put their fingers in them and grab a few, the cumin, fennel, clove, to help with digestion as well. So for the lungs, also, when we look at certain herbs, one of my favorite herbs is cordyceps. It's a mushroom. Burdock root is also good, cleansing and purifying. And comfrey is also good for the lungs. You may know that for sore throat, slippery elm or mullein. These are all herbs that are used to help with those conditions. And for constipation, you may be familiar with Cascara sagrada. I wouldn't use too much of that. It is a bowel irritant and it can cause cramping, but it will move your bowels. I mean, often we have to know what the problem of that constipation is. Is it dehydration? Is it poor muscle tone, and so you're not getting the peristalsis in the large intestine? That's where Cascara sagrada works, because it will literally cramp the large intestine and push materials out in that way. Rhubarb is also descending, so that will work, and licorice to a certain degree.
How do you spell the other one, the two-worded?
Cascara sagrada.
Yeah.
C-A-S-C-A-R-A, Cascara, C-A-S-C-A-R-A, sagrada, S-A-G-R-A-D-A, sagrada.
Thank you.
I think it's translated as sacred bark. but cascara sagrada. All right, any final questions? I think that's all we need to do around the metal element. Okay, lungs and large intestine. I hope you know more about it now and have a better feel for those kinds of things, and maybe even have a feel for the psychological type that goes with that. This is a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual kind of presentation that we all have all of these elements, but sometimes we get stuck in one. And it is what we call the primary condition or causative factor or constitutional imbalance. And setting that right can help the whole body work better.